Hello, and welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We want to hear your thoughts on the movies and shows we review.
Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel, and we will read them during the show.
Or reach out to us on social media. We love talking all things entertainment and pop culture with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. Hi, Ashley.
Hey, girl. Hey.
How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I am blessed and highly favored. So, great for a Tuesday. I have to say, the first time I heard about this show, I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks interesting. They're making this a dramedy. And I'm talking about the show we're recapping today, Unprisoned. It was released just the other day, March 10th, a dramedy, 8 episodes, rated MA, available on Hulu, a part of the Onyx Collective. Here's a quick summary. A messy but perfectionist relationship therapist and single mother's life is turned right side up when her father gets out of prison and moves in with her and her son. Cast: Kerry Washington as Paige Alexander. The Delroy Lindo as Edwin Alexander. We have Philae Reiko Tohanvia as Finn. Marquis Richardson as Mel, Dear White People. We have Jordan McIntosh as Little Paige. Brenda Song as Nadine Gregory. Ji Young Hung as Esty Nilsson. And Tim Daly as Bill. This show was created by Tracy McMillan. And the producers, we have Tracy McMillan, Kerry Washington, Delroy Lindo, Yvette Lee Bowser, Pilar Savon, Joy Gorman Wiltz, and Jen Broaden. Rotten Tomatoes gave this series 90% critics, the audience score of 95%. Google users gave this show 87%. Ashley, what's your grade for Unprisoned?
All right. So, a couple of things. First couple episodes, I kept thinking this was a Terry McMillan series. No, it's Tracy McMillan.
Did I say the wrong name?
No. For the first couple episodes, was thinking this is Terry McMillan, the novelist.
Oh!
I didn't know who Tracy McMillan even was. It took me, I was like, oh, wait, that's not Terry McMillan. Who's Tracy McMillan? So then I realized, oh, okay, this is somebody else. This is about this person's life. Okay, got it. I just was not familiar with her. And obviously her bringing this real life story to screen. But I thought this show was interesting because I don't feel like I've really seen this dynamic navigated this way, particularly with a father-daughter relationship. And so for that, I was very interested. I was also invested in Edwin's rehabilitation. But I wasn't fully pulled in this first season. Maybe because I still feel like I'm working through understanding Kerry Washington's character a little bit better, especially the dynamics with her being a therapist, but also obviously her being human. And then, I love Kerry Washington. I'm going to stick with this for a second season, but I know I'm getting older because I didn't love the young actress who played her younger version cussing so much. I was like, whoa, I really felt some type of way about y'all having this young actress dropping all these cuss words. It just bothered me.
Interesting.
I know. I was like, I'm getting old because I was like, this to me is so inappropriate. If this is my kid on set, I'd be like, I'm gonna need y'all to cut this back by 50%. So,
well, it definitely stood out to me, but Not enough for me to not enjoy it. But oh yeah, what's your grade, Ashley?
Dang, I did go through that whole diatribe and not even say my grade. My grade is a B.
A B. Thank you for that. All right, so for me, I literally said to myself, what a fascinating concept for a show. To your point earlier, never seen anything like this before. And it's worth having these stories in this format because this is a stat that I learned while getting ready for this particular conversation. 80 million Americans are living with a criminal record.
Yeah, Carrie has mentioned that during her press tour for this
Yeah.
series. It was definitely
And
startling
so,
because people seem to think you have to be an outlier if you've gotten into some type of criminal trouble.
and for people of color, I'm sure you can throw a stone and hit somebody you know, family, cousin, what have you, who has been a part of the system
Indeed.
and what it's like to navigate these waters. And so the only thing that came to mind was like Love After Lockup, and that's a reality, show. I don't watch it, but the people who do, oh, they watch it.
Yeah.
And so with that, because of the original conversation and the performances, I really Delroy is icon. Like he's a legend. And so he did a phenomenal job. I really did enjoy her son and everything. And so because of that, I gave this show a B plus.
Very nice.
All right, spoiler alert. So as I mentioned, this show is about Paige, who's a therapist, single mother, a daughter of a former drug dealer, and who apparently likes to date unavailable men. Her navigating her life with her son, teenage son, who is of mixed race. I think it's worth mentioning because race does have a whole lot of context in this series. Her father is getting out of jail after 17 years. And I want to talk about our first impressions. So, what was your first impression of Paige?
My first impression of Paige when we come into the series is she's very modern. She is a therapist who is thriving on social media, who likes to keep engaged with her, base of folks who like to get their therapy from her couch. And she seems like she's juggling her world okay. I mean, she has this teenage son. I mean, she obviously is going through it even from jump with her love life, but we don't know what that means during the first impression. So I just took it as, she's a therapist doing her thing, rocking it out on social media, single mom doing her very best, and navigating the dating waters. So that was my first impressions.
I was really surprised by her use of humor when dealing with her father because it's like, are you using humor to prevent yourself from crying? Or is it more of the same and therefore what's left, right, to do is just to laugh at it? But I was really impressed with how open she was to her Facebook following on the fact that she was picking up her father from jail and
Very
um
modern. Tell all your business.
to an extent, right? Because we find out later on that she doesn't always give um make herself vulnerable to people. We find quickly that due to her father being in and out of jail, that she lived with several families, one that she holds near and dear compared to the other. And she's very protective of her son. We meet Edwin Alexander. I'm just going to go ahead and give my first impressions. He is a charmer right off the freaking bat. Now, I'm not going to lie. At first, I thought his charm was centered around him trying to find someone to lay, because that's always the narrative you hear when people get out of jail, right? Like they looking for a lady. But I just realized very quickly that it's like, oh no, that's just who he is. It was the dangle cross earring for me.
He was very smooth. How quickly he picked that woman up in the grocery store. He was very smooth.
I do have a BS barometer when it comes to charm. Like I find it, I think the Bible talks about charm being deceitful. And I'm like, yep, it sure is. It sure can be. Because I'm like, whew, he lays it on quite thick.
Yeah, but he also goes for white women, as we see in this
Yes.
series. And that is of importance.
That is so true.
It's of importance because he makes it a point to always in the series speak about Paige going after white men as if she didn't learn from the environment and from you.
We meet Nadine quite early in the series. And I put in my notes, he really tried to make a hoe into a housewife, literally. Did you understand their relationship?
I don't know enough about Nadine yet, besides their relationship. You know, I know she went back and earned a master's degree. I know she's trying to do some things post, I guess, probably the height of their relationship. But she clearly got caught up with his shenanigans at one point in time. And that old thing keeps coming back.
He not only comes back, she holds his clothes and she runs his car. I don't know if I understand that type of love, Ashley. I don't.
Yeah, who's to say? I'm not in her shoes or in her position. I do hope she is wiser now, because she kind of alludes in the series that at one point in time she was a fool for love for him, and she knows better now. But we'll see in season 2 if that's the case. Because I feel like she's right back in it, personally.
Like any good therapist, Paige has rules when it comes to her father. She doesn't live with him, and she doesn't want him asking her for money. With that being said, by the second episode, he moves in with her. Let's talk about her boundaries with her father. I feel like they are absolutely legit, right? However, did you find yourself wanting her to be a little bit more lenient with him?
I thought that his parole officer, Mal, made a great point about thinking about allowing him to stay because of the circumstances of the environment he may be putting himself in if he doesn't. Yes. Coming straight out of the federal penitentiary, it's not like he has a lot of options. The man doesn't even have a license.
Exactly.
So I think that was a very, very valid point. But I understand why she has her rules in place, because she has lived with the trauma of him going in and out of prison her entire life.
That was one of the funnier lines for me when he's like, that's it, I'm never going back. She was like, there was 1986, 1992, 1998, oh, December of 1997, and 2005. Again, I think some of the humor is like things you wouldn't ideally think to laugh to, but he was like, I've always been there for you. It's just like, if you mean you've always been on a phone call away.
When she was like, I wonder what happened if I would have pressed 7. I was like, so what is 7? Somebody tell me, what does that do? Does that reject the call?
Oh my goodness. So speaking of the boundaries that Paige had with her father, do you think she had a right to want to keep her son away from him?
She's his mother. She absolutely had a right. At 16, though, he also has a right to state what he wants. So if he wants to have a relationship with his grandfather, I think that should be a conversation as well.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Like, I completely understood her hesitation because, I mean, young boys are impressionable and her father is a freaking charmer. Like, it makes sense to me that men who may live outside the parameters of the law and find themselves in jail, it is not surprising to me that they are charming because they be getting in those officers' draws quite often. And those COs, you know what I'm saying? And so and I felt like it was especially worth mentioning because he didn't have a male role model in his life. Like,
yeah, don't know where his daddy is.
exactly. And so,
well, we don't. He does, but we don't.
Exactly. But he's not in their lives, right? He hadn't seen his father in a long time. And so I felt like I understood it. But then at the same time, it's like, can you trust Edwin's decision making? And I think that was one of the overarching conversations anyway.
I'm going to be honest too. They made Delroy Lindo very palatable. Like they made him a very palatable ex-convict, whatever. Like everybody doesn't come out of prison in that condition, mentally, physically.
Very true.
Like they made his character very palatable. They made it seem like, well, why wouldn't you want him to meet your son? Look at this, it's Delroy Lindo, you know?
That's an excellent point. Speaking of making him palatable, I put this in my notes when it came to him giving Paige relationship advice. I refer to it as Pimpology 101. The side chick knows everything because their feelings don't matter. Would you trust his relationship advice?
I mean, honestly, yeah, because because the way the game he was putting her onto, I was like, I mean, is he lying though? Like the patterns of behavior you're seeing in this relationship, like there's something to be said for the male perspective on dating as a woman, because you may have experience, but you're not a man. And there is a relatability that they have with one another. Now, I'm not saying that if she had been with another guy that this advice may have been true, but at least in the situation she was in with old dude Bill, his advice seemed quite practical. The episode of him saying you're a main bitch, I even felt that. I was like, okay, Dad, okay.
Well, it's also, you have two options: yes, no, and maybe. And she's like, well, there's three. He was like, a maybe is a no. And I was like,
he said, you not some sloppy jump off. Like the language and everything. Like, but it was so heartfelt. They both shedding tears. I'm like, need some thug tears. Because y'all, the advice, I guess, is legit.
It's her going ballroom dancing with Bill and them seeing that father-daughter duo, and he out here talking about, you can get anything you want, my princess. And the inner child Paige came out with like, is this why essentially white women feel so entitled? But that was something I'm like, I thought that was an interesting call out. What about you?
Girl, don't bring my daddy issues out on this microphone tonight.
Girl.
No, it was absolutely a valid observation as someone who has the polar opposite of that in their lives, right? Who has never felt like their father has been able to provide emotional support, let alone any other type of support really for her, who has left her feeling abandoned. So I thought it was interesting. But given that she grew up in Minnesota in what seems like a predominantly white environment, I know this can't be the first time she's heard this ish. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. They are in Minnesota, and a lot of things are going on with Paige. She purchased her very first home. Her son has his very own room.
Again, I'm so excited for her.
Me too. Again, Edwin is living with her and he's looking for a job. He was able to get a job at the Parmesan Garden because he is skilled in the kitchen, but unfortunately, due to their ex-felon rules, he wasn't able to keep the job. But then this is where you were speaking to his character being palatable, but honestly, this whole series, I was sitting up wondering, when is he going to drop the ball, right? And I hate that. But then again, he's been in and out of prison because of some of the decision makings he's made through the years. And so him lying to her and getting the grandson involved, that started making me feel a little bit anxious. I'm not going to lie.
I didn't feel anxious yet about him going down the wrong path because I felt like in this case, he was trying not to exacerbate Paige's anxiety about feeling like he was going to do something to fuck up, because she definitely was very, very anxious about him absolutely returning. It was no question in her mind, I think, that he was going to do something and go back to prison. So in this case, I was like, but I get it, because, you know, you really thought this job was going to come through. Then they kind of turned on you in the last minute and all this and that. But the grandson then having to keep a secret,
yes,
was problematic, because now you're influencing negatively his relationship with his mother.
Correct.
So that is unfortunate. But they got close real quick.
They did. They did. Let's talk about this mother wound. Paige lived with her father, and then when he went to prison, she became a part of a foster home where she met her sister, Etsy, who was one of my favorite characters of the show. Mm-hmm. Like, she was so funny. You know, she was great. Paige loved staying with the pastor and his wife. Like, she refers to hanging out with that lady as her mother. But then what I didn't realize until this episode is that Nadine took care of her for about 10 years until she became of age. Do you feel like Paige gravitated towards the pastor and his wife because they resembled the quote unquote family unit compared to her relationship with Nadine?
No, I think Nadine was probably a bitch. I'm gonna be honest. Like, the way she describes the way that she treated her and stuff, she was like, you were emotionally unstable. You would do this, you would do that. And sorry, I shouldn't call her a bitch. I should say, I think her home environment was not ideal for a child, right? I think she was doing it because she loved Delroy Lindo, not because she loved Paige. And that in and of itself is the problem.
And you would feel that as a child.
You would feel that as a child, and you would feel her lack of preparedness to parent you. Like, just because I live under your roof doesn't make you a parent, right?
Very true.
And so I think they probably loved her and provided a nurturing environment, and Nadine did not.
Because I wanted to highlight also, I'm curious if her teen years played a role in how she felt about Nadine, you know, because there's that teenage angst to factor in. But
yeah, but I agree. That didn't start till she started when she was 8. So you weren't like that at 8. You had a solid 5 years before you turned into a angsty teen.
True. But I also thought it was interesting because it revealed something that I'm mindful not to criticize immediately, but it is such a big conversation in the Black community. And I'm referring to Paige's hair.
That part.
In this episode, you understand why Paige's hair looked the way it does. And when the little girl was like, he was like, yeah, I had that brush and that grease. And the little girl was like, bitch, you left me with these white women.
Mm-hmm.
My hair.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that was funny. And I'm like, that explains a lot. I also thought it was very sweet because I think this is something that Paige didn't realize until it actually happened. But creating your community and bringing everyone together, her son picked up on that immediately. Like, my heart was so warmed when he was like, I like church and pot roast and family. I'm like, look at that.
No, I thought it was really nice because it's just been the two of them for the majority of his life, I'm assuming. I mean, even her adoptive parents, who she loved, hadn't been a major part of their lives. Strangely, for whatever reason, they had grown distant. So I, I think it was nice because it just showed that even though, remember, she had told Duralindo's character, "Oh, I've done just fine without you." Her son showed a little bit more that there had been holes, that there had been
Yes.
needs that needed to be filled.
Yes. And pivotal lesson in this particular conversation too is, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? And I was blown away by that because, yes, Paige is a therapist. However, she is very much human. And the fact that she refused to look at her relationship with Nadine through the lens of gratitude, never thanked her, never, acknowledged any good out of that relationship. I thought that was an important lesson.
I thought that was a great line, but let me say this. Nadine needed to check her attitude as well.
I
A
agree.
relationship goes both ways. Just because you effing my daddy again,
Exactly.
he brings you around, does not mean you should be running your mouth. Like, if you want gratitude, you should also display gratitude. If you want kindness, you should also display kindness. So I get it. It was timely. It hit me. I understand. But there's also reasons why sometimes you don't have people in your life. So I hope Nadine also gets her ish together. Otherwise, you can go back on out the door when she came. Personally. So we'll see.
We will see. Mel has been hanging out with the family, kind of tough. So much so that he got a little kiss at that family dinner that it eventually blossomed into this relationship. What did you think about Mel and Paige's chemistry?
He reminds me of Kerry Washington's real life husband a little bit. So I thought they were cute. Like, I thought they were
Mm-hmm.
cute together. But the characters' chemistry was tough because it felt like Paige was always trying to psych herself up to like him and to be excited about him. So it didn't feel genuine. It felt like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is who I'm supposed to be liking, versus I'm really getting all the feels and butterflies. You know what I mean?
So when did you know Mel was in trouble?
I knew Mal was in trouble before they even got together. She's already been dealing with these issues that she has. She already talked about parent and partner being only separated by a letter, or however she put it. We've already seen her
Yes,
talk about patterns of behavior and her intimacy issues and all of that. So it was already going to be challenging. And then you throw on top of that, you have the relationship with her father. Like, is this even appropriate? You're his parole officer.
exactly. Exactly.
It's complicated.
I thought he was cute and adorable and really, really funny. And I felt sorry for him.
He's a
I'm
good,
like, come
great
on,
guy.
Paige.
He's a great guy. He is
What's
a
going
great
on?
guy. If she were together, he would be perfect for her. But she's not there. She's not there.
One of the things that became really apparent for me during watching this series is Paige's relationships with other people. It seemed like she keeps people at arm's length, right? And it makes sense to an extent, right? Because she, at a very young age, had to meet a lot of new people. Her overall fundamental stability was uprooted every time her father, went to prison, where on whether she stays with a particular family or home base or just feeling safe. But this episode for, you know, fuck normal, I feel like she laid it on a little bit too thick, Ashley. Like, talking to her coworkers, first of all, agreeing to do it for her coworker. Like, she's not even close to her coworker to put on a gender reveal party. But oh yeah, because she was prompted because she had never attended a bridal party or a baby shower or anything like that. So when her coworker showed up with that opportunity, she ran for it. In some ways, I respect her for wanting to expand herself, but again, telling your coworkers that your father was a drug dealer and your mom was a prostitute and alcoholic, I don't know. Is that my respectability politics coming out?
It's also probably, I mean, you're not in a like mental health role, right? Like you wouldn't expect to get that level necessarily of vulnerability on a regular Tuesday with your coworkers. That's not the norm whatsoever. People be like, this is a lot. Are you having a nervous breakdown? That's what that would be in a corporate office setting, right? Unless we
And
were, cool. Y'all can't see, but
right,
I'm like
exactly.
doing hand daps on camera. That's something you leave for your closest of close usually. But she's trying, she's trying. She's making an effort, like you said. She's making an effort.
She hosts this gender reveal party and it escalates pretty quickly from the hole in the ceiling to again her telling, or I don't want to say exposing herself, but just her opening herself up to new people. But ultimately, they weren't even fazed by it because her friend said that she thought it was brave and it gave her an opportunity to do a freaking TED talk. And we just had this conversation too. It's like we all live our own lives to tell our own stories to help inspire each other, right?
Very
When you're
true.
light, when you shine your light, you give other people permission to do the same.
Very true. The roofing thing stressed me out though. I was like, dang, and you signed with no contingencies.
But
Upsetting.
one of my favorite takeaways also is he fine? Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional? Had me rolling. Had me rolling. Did you notice how fierce little Paige was compared to adult Paige?
That little actress played her role well. But again, I just didn't like all the little cussing. Like, how old are you in real life, ma'am? I don't appreciate this. But no, she was great. She was a great little actress. I think maybe it's supposed to show also a difference in like you're a little bit more sedated when you're older, when you're an
Yeah.
adult versus when you're a
Life knocks
child.
you down a couple of pegs.
Yeah, and you just aren't as expressive, right? You don't feel quite as free to live fully in your emotions and all of that because life tells you and adulthood tells you got to pick your time and your place and your battles sometimes with all of that. So maybe that's what that was showing a little bit too.
So, as I mentioned, going back to Edwin, the Parmesan Garden didn't work out, but he was able to find a job at the equivalent of a Salvation Army. But the management of that place treated their workers so poorly.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate his willingness to stand up for himself and his coworkers, but I'm not gonna lie, I was freaking out when he quit that job.
I wasn't freaking out. I was just like, man, I thought because of the connection he and Paige have with the minister who helped him get the job, that
Yeah.
maybe he was going to be able to help with a change of management or of leadership. I was like, oh, well, if anybody may be to change it, maybe he can because his daughter has a personal relationship. That was her adoptive
Yes.
father. That's what I had hoped for. So that's what I was disappointed about. But I honestly wasn't worried about him. He's throughout this whole series, again, I was invested in his rehabilitation, but I thought like if it doesn't work out, he's still going to be okay. Like he's managed to survive this long. He's going to be all right. He'll figure it out. I hoped for the best. Well, you got
Is
people
it a
about to cut off their
hustle?
hand and they can't even go to the hospital. Like, no, sir.
That's insane. That's insane. Is a hustle something safe to do for a person who just got out of federal prison? I mean, he is technically free, right? But I didn't blame Paige for her apprehension on his ice cream hustle.
It didn't seem like the most sound investment. I'll say that. I think it was cool that he was inspired by these new things he's seeing in society because the whole idea sparked from him seeing food trucks, which as we know, food trucks have risen so
Yes.
much in popularity. So I'm like, well, maybe this is just the first step before he would eventually, because that's what he did. He said he was a cook. So maybe this is the first step on his way
Yes.
to getting a food truck, starting his own real business, all of that. So that's how I was taking it at the time. I understood her hesitation, but I was like, hey, maybe this is really a first good step, because he don't seem like the type who's probably necessarily going to do well working under somebody for very long. I don't, his personality type dictated maybe entrepreneurship is the path.
I agree. But I also was concerned about them living in Minnesota and like this is cute during the summer, but what you gonna do in those cold winters?
Because he was just selling ice cream and
Yeah.
popsicles.
Yeah.
Like I said, first step, I was hopeful.
Man, but when he was robbed at the end of episode 5, that really broke my heart. I low key thought it was one of his friends, though.
Could be. Or it could just be bad luck.
That's true, too. We take a trip to Alabama. It's nothing like going to the South. Were you familiar with Negressons?
No.
It was fascinating. We have the pre-encounter, the encounter, the immersion, the immersion. This is where the conversation of blackness came to be.
Again, I
I thought it,
struggled with this.
did you? Please elaborate.
I struggle with this because of the messenger. Again, I feel like it's a little hypocritical for him to constantly be questioning Paige and her son's blackness and all this and that, but you put her in this environment and you seem to also enjoy stepping into the white culture that you find yourself in with your preferences. So I just it was interesting. It was an interesting dynamic in that sense for me.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Like, what makes him blacker than them? It's purely because he's browner skin?
From the South, knows the black, the ways of the black.
The
I don't know. But he said something to the point of defending your blackness to black people is
peak
as
of
black
blackness.
as greens and cornbread, apparently. Um, I mean, have you ever felt like you had to defend your blackness, Ashley?
I've only had one friend that has ever tried to make me feel like I was somehow less black, but I feel like that came from her own insecurities because she is
Mm.
actually mixed race, but she looks blacker because she is browner skin. And so she wanted to shun the other race that she is mixed with. And so I feel like that is why that conversation came up quite a bit with her. Otherwise, it's never been a thing with me.
I have always had to deal with it to an extent. So like I am a product of Detroit Public Schools. And while I was there, all of the kids thought I was from the suburbs, which I was not, but it was based off how I talked. And I
Mm-hmm.
talk like my mother. So, and my mother was from St. Louis, and my grandmother was from Mississippi. But I'm like, I grew up on the east side of Detroit like everybody else. So, like, I don't know why are you questioning my blackness.
Yeah.
Um, I have always been in black schools. The first time I was really immersed in white culture was band camp. I was the only black kid out of a sea of white kids. Again, I held my own in those spaces, and then I went to college, which was a PWI.
Yeah, that's when
But
I had my first immersive
really,
white oh yeah. Yeah. I grew up on the black side of town. I went to predominantly black schools. I went to black churches. I did not have
black
that
churches.
immersive white experience until I went to undergrad. And now I low key regret that I didn't go to HBCU.
You know, I don't regret it, but I wish I would have been more open to it. I was determined not to go too far, um, away from home, which again, why Now, like if my daughter wanted to go to California, I'm like, go sis. Like, you know what I
Live
mean?
your best life.
Live your best life. We are an airplane away. But I didn't want to go into the South at that time in my life because that was my thinking, right? But yeah, and I take that back. Okay, so I went to high school. In high school, I got a chance to interact with more cultures because there was the suburb my family moved to had more diversity in it or whatever. But I think the questioning of my blackness had a lot to do with my me not knowing a lot of popular music at the time because I grew up listening to a lot of Christian music.
Yeah.
And I was not listening to Tupac or Biggie or even the popular R&B songs because I the story goes the radio was playing and I was young and I was singing the Daisy Duke song and they were like, "Oh, we're not listening to this anymore." And as a kid, you don't know what you're singing, right?
No.
And so, yeah, I talked like this and I didn't know who Tupac was really, you know.
I definitely think I got brushed with the bougie a little bit growing
Oh,
up
yeah.
in a predominantly Black community because of the lighter skinned, long hair situation. And doing well in school and all of that, and people assume certain things about you. So I think there's probably more of that than like you questioning how Black you are, that sort of thing for me.
I used to love me some Stephen Curtis Chapman. Anyway, young Finn got a chance to experience soul food, which, welcome.
He was really funny. Can I get everybody's cornbread? Everybody. It's like, poor baby.
We got a chance to understand why Edwin or Eddie escaped Alabama in the first place. It was a hard episode, but unfortunately, I don't know too many Black families that don't have a tough story, associated with what it was like living in America during those decades during Jim Crow.
I think that was important though, because it helps. It always helps to better understand family dynamics when you understand others' trauma and where they came from and what they went through. So understand how he had to try to shed his adolescence because of the things that he went through and being pulled from his environment and his mother being beaten in front of him and all that. I mean, that's definitely something Paige could not relate to, had not gone through.
Exactly. I feel like that also allowed her to give him more grace and empathy that she had not given him up until this point.
For sure.
But man, this episode really highlighted the vicious cycle when it comes to people trying to reacclimate into the world again after being incarcerated with, chicken or the egg, no ID, no birth certificate, no license, no job. So it's, in some ways, even looking at him trying to do the ice cream wagon, you learn to work within the limits, right? That was him being resourceful, trying to, because he couldn't drive, because he doesn't have a license. And it's like, and especially at his age, it's not uncommon that they may not have their birth certificate. And that's something I forgot about too.
I was frustrated. That was really frustrating scene. Like I felt his frustration through the screen of like, I'm doing everything right. And if this was good enough to get me here on a plane, which we know how stringent TSA and all of that is.
Yes.
You telling me, and I feel like certain people too, they get a high off of like that being gatekeepers, gatekeeping. And I just watched an episode of Snowfall. I'm just getting to Snowfall. I know I'm late.
Really?
And something similar happened where, it was just one of those moments of like, why can't you just not be like this in this moment and allow me to live my life, allow me to live my best life? And so I was like, please just don't get violent. Like, I don't want you to do anything just in this moment to have to go back to prison. But I was super frustrated for him.
Yeah, same. And them being called moon crickets. I had never heard that.
That was a new one
before.
For me. Yep.
In some ways, I almost appreciated that they just didn't go for the kicker. But it does not surprise me that there were creative ways to devalue and degrade Black people. So, what did you think about his statement? Everything I've ever done for you, good or bad, it was for you. Is that, do you want that responsibility? Like, I don't know how I feel about that statement.
Also, don't know if I feel like it was true. I feel like it
Mm,
sounded good, but I
right.
don't think that's true. I think you had some impulses that led you into certain situations. I think you have things that you haven't unpacked within yourself that have created these decisions as well. Like, so to make it seem like, oh, even when I've done things that have been criminal or any of this and that, I've done it just for you, I would call BS on that personally.
Mm, yeah. Like I understood what he was trying to say, but I'm like, I'm not gonna receive that. I'm not gonna take that.
No.
During the whole trip to Alabama, Paige refused to really call Mel back. And in my opinion, against her better judgment, they make themselves Instagram official. Edwin is out here riding dirty, talking about as a one-time job. I didn't trust it at all. Because I'm just like, I always equate it to like a drug. It's like you can't just hit it one time and say you're done, right? Like I feel like that life is gonna suck him back in.
I also just thought, I mean, I don't recall Paige asking your help with the roof.
Thank you.
When did she ask?
Thank you. Paige really disappointed me by sleeping with Bill. I I literally was like, no. What is it, Ashley? Why did she sleep with that man?
It's she unfortunately has not reached a point, even though again she's a therapist, which is one of the things I said at the onset of this recap that I am wanting to see more of in season 2, understanding the dynamics between her knowing professionally what she should do and the human nature of the decisions she's still making, right? Because those
Exactly.
of us without therapy degrees and that
Right.
experience, we go to therapists to try to unpack and heal from these things. So if you as a therapist are still making these
These really
same
bad
mistakes,
decisions.
even
Yes.
knowing better, that's tough to swallow. So I think had Paige not been a therapist, and I know that Tracy is in real life as well, I think
Mm-hmm.
her continuing down patterns that she knows are unhealthy would be easier to digest. It's like, but you know better. So why did you
Yes.
still do this thing? Why didn't you just go ahead and break up with Mal? Because obviously you
Exactly.
knew that this wasn't working out instead of, putting the icing on the cake of knowing you would dissolve your relationship now because you've had this setback. Now for her, she saw it as a personal breakthrough, right? She's like, this is what I needed to know now. You're not the one, but you're still hurting this other man in the process. So I can't tell you why she did it. That's for her to diagnose within herself. She's the therapist. But I can tell you that as a viewer was harder for me because I thought she knew better by now.
I thought she knew better by now as well.
But she's human.
She is. She has her TED Talk, which she wanted to highlight her picker issue when it comes to men or relationships. Understanding that her relationship with her father has impacted her relationship, her romantic relationships. But thinking she had it all solved with liking the good guy. Moments before she gets on stage, she gets a call that Edwin has been arrested. That was a rough one. I was like, right before you get on stage, sis, damn.
As soon as I heard them sirens behind him, I was like, well, it's been real. It's been
I
fun.
knew it was happening. Every time he did something like behind the wheel, I was like, oh, he's going to get pulled over for something. I knew it. I knew it.
DWB.
So, the biggest topic in the final episode of the season is Will she or won't she bail her father out of jail? This was this was an interesting episode to watch as an audience member because you grow to like Edwin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you understand what led him to this arrest. But Paige didn't even want to hear why he was arrested. She just was clear on the fact that she was not going to bail him out. Where do you stand when it comes to bailing him out?
So before we got started, I mentioned that I felt like the son wasn't giving her enough grace in that he wanted her to have the same reactions he had, but this is his first time dealing with any of this versus she has had trauma throughout her life that he will never understand in her relationship with her
Yes.
father. So
Mm-hmm.
I tried to extend that same grace to her, especially in this episode, because I did struggle with the fact that she was so adamant about not seeing him, not helping him, not figuring things out. But I've never been in that position. I've never been in that situation. And she clearly, as she said in the very first episode, has done it one too many times for her liking.
Right.
So yeah, I tried to have grace for her, honestly, and let her go through the process she needs to. Even he that's why he didn't call her. Remember, he in jail, picked up the phone, but couldn't make the call because he already knew that he had broken it, possibly for the last time.
That's a good point. Her TED talk goes viral, so that should be interesting to see in season 2. But she talks to Mel and she flat out tells him what she did. And the way he was like, okay, so we're over.
I respected that man for that.
I did. And then when he called her out,
boundaries.
He was like, hurt people, and I should have known better.
Yep. That's a man with true boundaries, because a lot of people, probably myself included, would have wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, would have wanted to talk it through, would have wanted to better understand. And then maybe you're not ready right now. Maybe, da. No, she did you dirty the first time. You recognized it. It's over. But I'm wishing you the very best. You deserve someone great. But ain't nobody gonna put up with this bullshit.
Woo!
Until you get it together. I want to be more like Mal.
That was real. He's the MVP for that. Ultimately, Paige decides to bail her father out because, and I respect this thought where it's like, yes, he has disappointed me time and time again. And yes, I do have the right to not bail him out if I choose to. But at the end of the day, who do I want to be? Because again, you can stand in, your self-righteousness, but ultimately, when it all boils down, who do you want to be in these type of situations? And I respected that. It's a question I ask myself daily. Who do I want to be today? But he's already bailed out. His PO got him out. I will say Nadine should have called Paige before she took Finn to jail, though. She was devastated when she found out Finn went to jail. That kind of broke my heart a little bit.
What I say about old Nadine, she got some work to do as well.
All right, Ashley, really quick, some things that I saw during the press tour that I thought was wonderful and worth mentioning. Delroy was very big on representation. He's an executive producer, but he said that when he was approaching this character, he felt like visibility is important. And he said, in the specific is the universal. So like I said at the top of the podcast, this is such a fascinating concept of a show, one that I don't think we've ever seen before. And because of it, even for individuals like you and I, even though that's not our life experience, we had the opportunity to really become invested in the characters and their well-beings and understanding. It'll ultimately help us understand individuals who go through this. I actually one of my one of my good friends from middle school. He never really talked about his dad, but I found out much later that his father was incarcerated, the
Mm.
nicest boy you'll ever meet. And, you have these preconceived notions on what people or families of the incarcerated are like. And it's just simply not true.
Yeah, and even me saying that Delroy Lindo's character is palatable, again, I
Yeah.
say that as being that there could be different variations of that, but that also breaks the stigma because you also think you know exactly what someone who has served time looks like, feels like, seems like, and this was not necessarily that.
Yes. Delroy also said in an interview that, like, why does he do his work? He wants to illuminate the human condition. And we all have such unique stories. Kerry Washington said there was only one person she wanted for the role. And fun fact, Delroy has never watched Scandal. Can you imagine?
Yes, actually, I can, but
And this one cracked me up, Ashley. Kerry Washington said, when discussing the relationship between Paige and Edwin, she said, parents know how to push your buttons because they installed them.
hmm, okay.
Final thoughts on Unprisoned.
I am very curious to see what's going to happen with season 2. I really hope that Edwin is able to stay on the good foot. I know that this is based on Tracy's real life, so it's Googleable to see what obviously occurred and get more in detail, but I don't want to. I want to let the story play out for me and not dig too deep and research too deep into it
And
because
it's loosely based off of her life. So
yeah,
it's not
it's not a
exactly.
biopic, but I'm just
Yes.
saying, usually I will go down a rabbit hole and try to see what her daddy was up to and how many times did he end up going. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to do
Yeah.
any of that research this time. I'm just going to let the story tell me what it's going to be. And I'm rooting for it. I'm rooting for them. This is our second Onyx Collective series. We did Reasonable Doubt.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm very excited to see the continued investment in these stories that highlight Black folks doing the thing. And yeah,
I agree. I agree. Yeah, looking forward to seeing a season two. I think the show is good enough to, continue these stories. The acting was phenomenal. Like, again, Delroy, like legend already, icon, but he put his foot in this role and I appreciate it. Paige, Kerry Washington did a great job, but I feel like I'm having a hard time connecting with her. And I feel like we got a chance to see more of her as the season went on. However, I wasn't always rooting for her in her actions. So great job, everyone. Thank you for the courage to tell these types of stories. And I look forward to seeing more. All right, time
indeed.
for hidden gems.
All right. I only have one hidden gem. And actually, I watched this a little while back. But since we were talking about prison, this was timely. And that is Murdaugh Murders, a Southern scandal on Netflix.
I
You
saw that,
guys
Matt.
may be familiar with the name Alex Murdaugh at this point. He was
Yep.
just found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife and son. I was completely unaware of this story when I clicked play on this on a Saturday afternoon.
Did you do it because it was a
I
top
just clicked, I
show?
think it was like maybe number 5 or something at the time. So I was
Yeah,
like, sure, why not have a little true crime on a
girl,
sunny Saturday?
girl.
The series of events that transpired within this family and the community in South Carolina is wild. Netflix got there
Insane.
first and got firsthand accounts from a lot of the major players involved in these incidents and the families. So I'm suggesting this for any true crime watchers, or if you just want to know more, you've followed some of the Alex Murdaugh trial, you just want to know more about this case and the other victims of this family's crimes. Because let's be real, there are 2 other major crimes that are talked about in this Netflix series, 3 actually, even before the
Yes.
murder of Alex's wife and son. It's wild. So I
You
definitely
know,
encourage everybody to check it out.
there's also a documentary on HBO. I was like, is this like the
There's also
parallel?
a documentary on Hulu.
What? Wait. It reminds me, when the last time they did this? They
The
did this with
fire, the what's the
the
name
fire
fire.
festival
Yeah.
and old girl with the blood, the drop.
Yeah, Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah.
I mean, all the streamers want to get in on the major stories, especially as we talked about having all these major high profile scandals of rich and, CEOs and all this these days. I totally get that.
Yes.
But this was deep.
Yeah.
This was deep, deep. So anyway,
Conversation on privilege. It was a
on
mess.
drug abuse, on
Yes.
alcoholism,
Alcoholism.
on
Yes.
consent, on abuse, on a lot of things.
Yep.
A lot of things. A lot of things. So I'm sorry. That is my one hidden gem, Delora. What about you?
I have two this week. So, I love a period moment. I watched this movie. It's available on HBOMAX. It's called Belle. It's from 2013. It stars Gugu Batra. It is loosely based off a real life mulatto aristocrat in England. Here's a quick summary. The illegitimate mixed race daughter of a British admiral plays an important role in the campaign to abolish slavery in England. So, this is one of the cases that happened right before the official ending of slavery in England. And it's a fascinating story. There is a real life portrait of her in it with her cousin, because we are in paintings, but as you know, they're not as many as I'm sure that has existed through history, but we were there. We've always been there. Anyway, beautiful story, beautifully shot. Black woman director, highly recommended. It was a lot of fun. Well, not a lot of fun, but for a period piece, you have the drama and then you have the long gazes across the fields and the dresses, and I don't know. I loved it. So, real life TV Bridgerton, not the novels, but the Netflix series. My second hidden gem is a song. It is a jazz song by Adam Blackstone featuring the Jazmine Sullivan. The name of the song is called Round Midnight. And the things that Jazmine Sullivan does vocally, it's phenomenal, especially towards the end of the song. I was on Instagram, and one of my favorite singing accounts, they have the range. They were giving Jazmine her flowers, and I was like, yeah, let me look at Jazmine on Apple Music, and I just was looking through some of the songs I wasn't as familiar with, and I clicked on this one, and I have been stuck on this one. So if you want a jazzy moment, and if you want vocal acrobatics, highly recommend this song, Round Midnight. And the entire album is also a jam. Adam Blackstone, he has my man, meaning my boy Leslie Odom Jr., Queen Latifah's on here, Kirk Franklin, Mary. It's a whole vibe, that whole album. The name of that album is called Legacy. So came out in 2022. It's jazz. So that's all I got.
All right. Very nice. Well, guys, thank you so much as always for sticking with us. I have to go. I got to go pack, but we will be back with more very, very soon. So in the meantime, be blessed.
Bye.